But my name is Alexis Rodgers, and I'm a proud VCU graduate, as many of my friends know. Thank you. I'm also the Director of Communications for the Virginia League for Planned Parenthood and the Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia. It's a new job for me, but last year I was honored to be before you and invited by Delegate Betsy Carr and Deb Love to present to you about young leaders in our community and the impact and the influence that my generation is having on our great city. And many of you know that was before a certain election of 2016 and before our featured guest today was in office, but he was definitely among the leaders that I referenced as having a great influence already in Richmond and will continue to have a great influence in the city. So today I'm very excited to share a little bit about Eyes on Richmond and introduce our speaker. After he speaks, I'll rejoin him on the stage to help moderate some of the Q&A from you all, so I hope that you'll think about some questions for the mayor. This year's Eyes on Richmond theme is reclaiming the prophetic voice of justice. And certainly an important time in our history to be having this conversation. You don't have to look far to see injustice right on our streets, in our communities, in our backyard, in the home that we all call, that we all love. At the same time, it's a great time to have a leader like Mayor Stoney, who is fighting for justice for our city and fighting for one inclusive Richmond. You all know that from week to week we'll address a different issue, and so I invite you back throughout the series. But for today, Mayor Stoney, as you all know, sworn in this past year, or earlier this year, as the youngest mayor of the city, and it's incredible to have him in office. He was raised here in Virginia, product of public schools. Many of you know his story. One of the things that I'm proudest of is his bold advocacy for progressive values, whether it's restoring voting rights or fighting for inclusive communities. But I can tell you this, I'm also excited he's focused on potholes and balancing our budget and getting things in order, so that also deserves a round of applause. Already, Richmond's continuing to rise to the ranks under his leadership, whether it's being named the number 2 top place where millennials are moving. I hope that we'll be number 1, Mr. Mayor, next year. And also, so many great things that RVA's being known for right now. And so, the accolades are going to keep piling up under his leadership, and I hope that you'll join me in welcoming Mayor Stoney to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I don't know what this is. You mind if I put this somewhere? That's some money right here. Well, before I begin, I want to thank you, Alexis, for that introduction. Ben, thank you for being a friend and a supporter for a very, very long time. And Delegate Carr, thank you so much for the invitation as well and your service. It was an honor to be here today at St. Paul's to kick off your 2017 speaker series, which will, in the coming weeks, explore the concept of justice, of reclaiming the prophetic voice of justice. I'm excited to speak to this issue because it is at the core of my personal beliefs on the power of change and the importance of public service, as well as the concept of one Richmond that I strive for every day. I have the privilege to serve as the great mayor of this great city. And I'm especially pleased because I know that this is an issue that resonates throughout the people in this room. Being in this space amongst this community congregation that has served the city so well for so many years, I feel like I'm literally preaching to the choir. I've been asked today to answer the question about how we in Richmond can build a just society through education, housing, and transportation. In this context, to me, justice is all about the equality of opportunity. Let me repeat. Justice is all about the equality of opportunity. No matter what neighborhood you live in or what color your skin may be, we all share the same desire for a high quality of life. safe neighborhoods, good schools, and a fair shot at making the most of our God-given talents. The challenges faced by the poor and downtrodden in our city reflect decades of institutional racism and discrimination that have disenfranchised a large segment of our population. They have done more to hold the flesh and blood of our city back than any bronze and granite Confederate monument ever will. I pursued a life in public service to right some of these historic wrongs and give a voice to the voiceless. That's why I was very fond of my work as Secretary of the Commonwealth. It was very, very rewarding for me. There, I headed the governor's efforts to restore rights to thousands of former offenders. And it is what drives me today at City Hall. Unfortunately, everyone doesn't start on the same footing. It's our job to seek equity, to provide opportunity through policymaking. I firmly believe government has an important role to play in impacting lives by leveraging our partnerships and resources with those who have to lift up those who have not. I know firsthand the transformative differences this kind of intervention can produce because I've been a recipient of government's good work. My grandmother raised my brother and me on a Social Security check. I grew up on free and reduced lunch. I was able to go to college with the help of subsidized Stafford loans and Pell Grants. I'm pretty sure I was also the beneficiary of affirmative action, and that allowed me to be the first in my family to attend and graduate college. And here I am today. So, after 36 years and nearly 9 months in office, I can tell you that the answer to the question of building a more just Richmond is yes, we can do it. But we must all be prepared to recognize that this will not happen overnight. This will take time and a sustained, intentional commitment over a number of years. Ladies and gentlemen, we can do it, but not in the silo of city government alone. We will need the help from state and federal sources, nonprofits, and the business community, and people like you. And we can do it, but not by focusing piecemeal on only one specific area, like building schools or bus routes or public safety and public housing. Instead, these issues need to be addressed simultaneously and in coordination. Our ability to achieve and sustain fairness and equality in all of them lay in a holistic approach that embraces a hard truth. That as an entire city, we must accept the responsibility of unshackling our at-risk communities and the next generation from the bondage and trauma of generational poverty. 1 in 4 of our residents live in poverty, and 40% of our children do. In public housing, where more than 10,000 of our residents live, the poverty rate is nearly 60%. My friends, breaking this cycle of despair is the moral challenge of our time. We can do it, and we must do it. So how do we go about it? How do we move from a city marked by profound disparities to a city that provides meaningful opportunity for all in these critical areas? What exactly does one Richmond look like in practice? Let me tell you what we've been doing and what we plan to do. In my campaign for mayor last year, I pledged to do everything in my power to support the students of Richmond Public Schools. And I also pledged to continue and grow the city's work to fight poverty and build community wealth, led by our Office of Community Wealth Building. We have already done a lot to fulfill both pledges. I provided the largest increase in school funding ever proposed by a mayor in our introduced budget this past spring. And my administration worked effectively with the City Council, School Board to establish the RVA Education Compact, which for the first time ever establishes a structure of ongoing communication, collaboration, and problem solving between our elected bodies. These are not just words on a piece of paper. This is an accountability document, one that binds the three arms of government that impact our school children to do something that seems obvious, but has been all too lacking for many, many years, to talk to each other and work together to find solutions. Part of those solutions involve repairing and replacing our aging infrastructure. And working with council and the school board, I'm committed to finding a responsible and sustainable funding approach this coming year to address these needs, which in my view needs to include a plan to rezone and right-size our district to put our resources where they are needed the most. Of course, our children can't learn if there are no teachers to teach them. Like you all, I was distressed to learn from RPS that it was scores of teachers short to start the school year. Now, I know the district is doing its best to close the gap, but my administration is also getting involved. That's why this fall, I will be doing an education recruitment tour of a number of public colleges and universities to encourage those interested in education to choose Richmond and bring their skills to our city. Our children also can't be hungry for knowledge if they're just plain hungry. A recent study from the University of South Carolina documented the underperformance of school children on math exams when the testing occurs at the end of the food stamp cycle. Given our childhood poverty numbers, it's not hard to fathom that this dynamic could be at work in Richmond and affecting school performance as well. That is why we have worked closely with my close friend, the First Lady of Virginia, Dorothy McAuliffe, and her program, No Child Hungry, which last year provided 10 million more meals statewide to hungry kids in Richmond and elsewhere than it did 3 years ago. Richmond and at-risk communities in Southwest Virginia are also the beneficiaries of $8.8 million federal grant that will guarantee breakfast and lunch to every Richmond school child. We want our kids to rocket to success, and we are making great strides to providing them the fuel that can get them there. Additionally, we must not remember the time that our children spend outside of the classroom. And that's why in the coming year, you will see a robust effort from our administration on how we tackle out-of-school time. We know that the hours between 3 and 6 are the height of where some of our kids find other alternatives instead of being in school. And we have to work on that together. But also, we can't ignore the environment in which our children and their families are living. That's why we are taking steps to improve the quality of life by advancing the equality of opportunity in most of our vulnerable communities. This year's budget roughly doubles our community wealth building efforts compared to last year. Through this enhanced funding and a significant state grant, this fiscal year we have dramatically expanded the capacity of the office to provide holistic job training services to hundreds of residents. The goal is to not only help people find a job, but also to forge and navigate a pathway out of poverty to economic stability. The state grant has allowed us to hire 15 additional employment specialists to work with city residents throughout our neighborhoods. Since July 1, more than 1,700 people have come through the doors of our city's Center for Workforce Innovation, and we are currently serving 20 families through our Building Lives to Independence and Self-Sufficiency program. Additionally, we must be intentional about getting jobs to those who need them. in this 10-block radius of downtown, over the next 5 years, you're going to see a multi-million-dollar investment from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University, and Dominion Energy. Just only a mile away, there are those who sit at home without a job. It would be a shame over the next decade if those who only live a mile away are not the beneficiary of the investment made right here in this square block radius. So we're off to a good start, but as the recent tragic events in Gilpin Court remind us, we have far to go to reclaim not only lost lives, but lost hope. Recently, I called the parents of Janelle Smith, 20-year-old, who lost her life in Gilpin Court. Calls I regularly make that tug at my heart each and every time I make them. Nevertheless, this hardens my resolve toward finding a fix for those we've left behind in public housing. Much of our wealth-building outreach involves our citizens who live in our public housing communities, where a substantial portion of our poverty and crime is concentrated. As you know, our public housing courts fall under the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority, a HUD-funded public housing agency that is a political subdivision of the Commonwealth of Virginia with independent powers. It is administered by the RHA board that is appointed by the Richmond City Council. HUD has not been kind to the city's funding requests. Am I correct, TK? And I have no great expectations that our support will increase under the current administration in Washington, D.C., which has demonstrated hostility to cities and the country's most vulnerable communities. But it is clear that we need a new model of affordable housing in Richmond. And we need a chart a path to building that model beginning today. That's why we are convening a housing summit on the morning of October 31st. For weeks, we've been meeting and working regularly with housing leaders and stakeholders like Greta Harris at Better Housing Coalition and Laura Lafayette with the Realtors Association. And our expectations for this summit will be to draft a new housing plan for the city that includes options for a dedicated funding source for the redevelopment of public housing. Later this fall, we are also sponsoring a summit in conjunction with the Commonwealth's attorneys to explore and address the root causes of crime in our city. From this, we will develop strategies that make us better able to prevent violence and respond to the trauma and crisis it causes in our at-risk communities. In the short term, we've stepped up our efforts to create more of a law enforcement presence in high crime areas and are implementing our policy of assigning dedicated patrols to each housing court, which are already proving to be positive factors in deterring crime. Since September 1, we have not experienced a violent crime in the East End housing courts. Today is September 22nd, I believe. So 22 days. That's a long streak, and I hope it will continue throughout the remainder of the year. We should measure justice not by arrests for lives lost, but by lives saved from opportunities created to learn, to live safely, and to better ourselves. And I think a big part of doing that, of building One Richmond, is to affirm the relationship between what I call bridging RVA and growing RVA. We need to capture our current growth and leverage it for those who have not benefited from our recent successes. Let me be clear. I believe our city is resurging, but we are only as strong as our weakest neighborhood. We can't help our children reach their full potential without also helping their parents find steady employment and without working to make our neighborhoods wealthier, healthier, and safer. I was gratified to see that our work and the efforts of the Richmond City Health District under the guidance of Dr. Danny Avula resulted in Richmond being recognized as one of 8 national recipients of the Robert Wood Johnson Culture of Health Prize for promoting healthy lifestyles and policies. I'm also encouraged by our economic development gains with major companies like CoStar and Owens & Minor, which includes a provision for adding up to 300 jobs from the ranks of our workforce development program right here in the city. As we continue to pursue economic development opportunities downtown and on the boulevard, we will create opportunities for jobs and advancement. The two must be tied together. And the revenue generated by these developments will fund the revitalization of neighborhoods and investment throughout our city and beyond their footprint. This is where transportation can play a major role. After 50 years, we are in the process of revamping our outdated transit system. The new system will reduce waiting and commute times without increasing fares and integrate our network with the Bus Rapid Transit project to further help connect residents relying on mass transit to employment opportunities beyond the city. All these components are what will help build not only a better city, but a just city. And none of this will be easy. 2 statements come to my mind when I think about the task that lies ahead. One of them is from a quote that is on my desk in City Hall from President John F. Kennedy: "One person can make a difference, and everyone should try." And then there is the great American writer James Baldwin, who said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Ladies and gentlemen, I believe one person can make a difference. And I believe we must be bold and face the challenge to change the institutions and conditions of life in our city that have kept Richmond's bright future shackled to the inequities and injustice of our past. You have my commitment, and frankly, I need yours. I need you to speak up when we request the means to make progress in these areas. And I need you to speak out when critics emerge who don't see the big picture or see only themselves in that picture. This must be bigger than the crumbs we've become accustomed to fighting over. We must make our future bouts worthy of the drama normally manufactured. It's easy to complain about ills and challenges in the city. You all know that's easy, and you all know it can be a spectator sport. But it's much harder to jump into the arena and attempt serious change and stay committed to it, not just on a 4-year election cycle, but for the long term, the 10 to 15 years it's going to take for this generation to create real opportunity, real justice for the next generation. Yes, this challenge will outlast my time in office and maybe even the lives of some of us gathered here today. But it is important work, and it is important that we don't shrink from facing it. And believe me, it's worth it. It's so worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm encouraged by our children. The best part of my job is visiting with our young people day in and day out. By nature, I'm an optimistic person. And given my personal story, how can I not be? But our children are my inspiration, and they should be our aspiration. They demonstrate to me that there is a reason to be hopeful. They are our number one asset, and we must protect their future to ensure our city's future. In life, many of us just don't have the luxury of choosing our moments. Sometimes the moments choose us. I truly believe this is our moment. I believe I was elected to make the most of this opportunity for change, to bring people together and get the city started on a path forward that will make life here better for everyone. This is about what we want to be as a city. And in the great civic tradition of this gathering, I invite you to seize this opportunity and join us in making it happen. With your support, I know we will succeed. Thank you.